A bright spot for Johnson Johnson today as third quarter earnings and revenue beat expectations. But J&J stock has taken a hit this year as the company faces numerous lawsuits over allegations that some of its products contribute to everything from the opioid crisis to ovarian cancer. We're going to talk about all of this. Joining us from the company headquarters in New Brunswick, New Jersey is Joseph Wolk, Johnson Johnson CFO. And in studio, we have Yahoo Finance's Anjali Kamlani. Mr. Wolk, thank you for joining us. Let me start with this, because we know we're going to talk about the lawsuits and also the good stuff out of the report. But what is the key thing that you want investors to pay attention to as the company is moving forward? Because you did beat on revenue and on earnings.
That's right. Thank you, Adam, for having me on. I appreciate your interest in Johnson & Johnson. And I think the one thing that investors should really focus on is just how focused we are as a company to do what we've done for 133 years, and that's delivering transformational innovation and healthcare solutions to all parts of our business. So whether it be consumer, medical devices, or pharmaceuticals, I was really pleased with the press release and the financial results that we were able to report, the opportunity to take up guidance for the year. But what pleased me just as much, and what I think investors will focus on, is really the future. In that same press release, we had 15 items that were notable advances across our pipeline. So we continue to look good in the rearview mirror, but also going forward, we're very, very strong, despite some challenges we may face.
And of course, Joseph, when you talk about the future and the challenges you face, the future has to do with a lot of legal fights as well, because you all have taken the tack of fighting the lawsuits that have come up against a host of different products. And you have said earlier today that you're not planning to set aside any legal reserves tied to that fight, although you've spent $832 million on litigation expenses this year. When do you think you'll get your arms around what the future costs of these fights are going to be?
Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the things that's sometimes done, particularly in the media, is they're all bucketed as kind of one instance or one case. These are very unique cases, and if I could just very briefly go through the Risperdal case from last week, U.S. Supreme Court precedent strongly suggests that will be overturned and the amount will be significantly reduced. No one's disputing the quality medication it is for the treatment of psychosis. It's on the WHO's list of essential medicines. In the case of talc, I think it's important to remember just what big business plaintiffs' attorneys have developed here with lawsuits like this. Life sciences makes up about 50% of outstanding cases in product liability, when there's never been a safer time for these products or a more efficacious time for these products. So, they spent about $400 million already this year in advertising, often funded by venture capitalists, to drum up the numbers in their class action suits. So we think it sets a very bad precedent to not fight these. And I'll remind everybody that on appeal, not one of these verdicts against us has been upheld. With respect to opioids, two different paths there. You saw in Oklahoma where we continue to fight. We thought the theory of law by which that was brought under in public nuisance was flawed, and we think the facts of the case were ignored. We're being singled out because we have a strong financial position. We have a strong balance sheet, but remember, we have less than 1% of the overall opioid share. In Ohio, for opioids, we took a different tack. There was a settlement that was proportional relative to the other defendants, and it was an opportunity where funds could actually go to the victims of opioid addiction. So there, whether we had a reasonable counterparty, we were able to find a solution. We're going to make those decisions based on what's best for all stakeholders of our company, including shareholders. And
Joseph, you did mention earlier that the industry of class action lawsuits, especially against the life science industry, is something in the ballpark of $36 billion. Just talk to me about how that plays in context for the history of Johnson & Johnson. You're saying that you're playing in a litigious environment. What has that looked like in the past?
Yeah, I think life sciences has always been targeted, certainly as a very successful company who cares about their reputation. We are targets, unfortunately. It's the business in which, or the game we've decided to play in. But we stay very focused, and this is really, I'm speaking on behalf of 135 global associates, focused on innovation, healthcare, that really bolsters our reputation going forward. If you think about some of the great activity going on today, where we have potential cures for HIV, for tuberculosis, Ebola. Those are the things that will stand the test of time in Johnson & Johnson's reputation. It's what we've done for many, many years.
So let's talk a little bit more about the reputation. Is there a reputational risk, however, from all of that's going on, the various lawsuits that are going on? I know you all get about half of your revenue from the prescription drug business. You get about a third from devices, and then the remainder is from the consumer business. One would think that the consumer business is the most vulnerable from reputational risk. What are you doing besides talking about fighting these lawsuits? Are you doing any increased marketing? Are you taking other strategies in order to try to keep the reputation?
Yeah, so I don't know that we're doing additional strategies. I think part of the story and part of the narrative for Johnson & Johnson for years has been just how broadly based we are in healthcare. So most people think of Band-Aids, baby shampoo. That business has not been hurt by the lawsuits and some of the headlines we see. Our products are still highly valued and used by consumers around the world. And it's even less so, I would say, in the medical device and pharmaceutical setting. So we're not doing anything new per se, but there is an ongoing narrative of Johnson & Johnson, just how we play in solutions for healthcare.
Let's talk about going forward, because you did get FDA approval for Xarelto, you got FDA approval for Invokana and then Stelara to expand the use of the drugs from their initial applications. And Stelara was one of the standouts. I think, the growth year over year was 31%. How much of an impact is the upcoming use of these medications in a greater arena going to play on your bottom line?
Yeah, so in all those cases, Adam, they're expanding the population by which these great products can be used. They already have a great safety profile based on the initial indications for which they were approved, whether it be here in the U.S. or outside the U.S. And we're finding new applications for these medicines in other unmet areas. So it does bode very well. And usually these are, I would say, under-penetrated areas. So in other words, there's not significant remedies out there available to patients today. So it's great for our business. It's even better for patients.
Speaking of elsewhere, what does the international market look like for you right now? Obviously, you're facing all the pressures and the headlines about the lawsuits at home, but abroad you had the success of the Ebola in the Congo. So tell me a little bit about that. Yeah, so our outside the U.S. markets are actually doing better than the U.S. markets. I think if you look over the past couple of years, it's usually been the U.S. outperforming. This year, we've had, in the quarter at least, we've had about 7%, 7.5% growth outside the U.S., about 3% in the U.S. So that's what translates to the 5.2% you saw for the enterprise when you consider the impact of some divestitures we had recently.
All right. Joseph Wolk is the CFO at Johnson & Johnson. And we should point out the stock is trading up almost 2.5% right now. Good to have you here on The Move. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.